The cabin at Whispering Pines had always been more than wood and nails to me. My grandfather built it 50 years ago with his own hands, shaping the beams from nearby oaks and stacking stones for a fireplace that had warmed 3 generations of Landrys. It was a sanctuary, one place where I could breathe, far from traffic, deadlines, and the constant demands of city life. When I unlocked its creaky door and stepped inside, I felt a tether snap, as though the world's noise stayed outside. But even sanctuaries aren't safe from intrusions. Not when an HOA is involved. Whispering Pines Lake had once been a rustic retreat where families came for fishing, cookouts, and star-filled nights. Over time, though, permanent residents pushed for order. They formed a homeowners association to handle maintenance, but the mission slowly shifted. Rules multiplied. Fines grew. And into this carefully built hierarchy strode Karen Whitmore. Karen was the embodiment of unchecked authority. Tall, sharp-featured, and perpetually armed with a clipboard, she patrolled the community like a self-appointed sheriff. A former HR director, she had the polished smile of someone used to saying, "Policy requires this," while gutting a person's dignity. Her short blonde hair was always perfectly in place, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. People whispered, "HOA Karen," when she passed, though rarely loud enough for her to hear. I had managed to avoid the worst of her reign. My cabin sat on the edge of the lake, apart from the cluster of pastel cottages where most of her acolytes lived. But she still left her mark. I'd found red stamp notices taped to my door, complaints about my dock, warnings about my paint color, even a reprimand for stacking too much firewood. I ignored her as best I could. Power-hungry people hate nothing more than being starved of attention. That changed one Wednesday evening. I had arrived early for a long weekend, planning to fish in the mornings and work on repairing my sagging back deck in the afternoons. As the sun lowered behind the treeline, painting the lake in copper light, I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. A black SUV pulled into my drive. Karen emerged, clipboard under her arm, striding with the confidence of someone who never asked but always demanded. "Mr. Landry," she called. "We need to discuss community spirit." That phrase alone set alarms off in my head. Karen only used community spirit when she was about to ask for something outrageous. I leaned against the railing, sweat still clinging to me from hauling lumber. "Evening, Karen. What violation is it this time?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. "This isn't about violations. This is about cooperation. The Whitmore family reunion is this weekend. We have relatives flying in, and naturally, my home cannot accommodate them all. The board has already agreed that it would be in the best interest of the community if we had access to additional lodging. Your cabin is underutilized, so it's been chosen." I blinked, sure I'd misheard. "You're saying you want me to leave so your family can stay here?" "Not want. Need." Her tone was clipped, final. "You'll vacate Friday through Sunday. We'll provide cleanup afterward, and you'll be reimbursed $50 per night. It's generous, really. And it sets an excellent precedent for future shared use." A laugh escaped me before I could stop it, raw and incredulous. "Karen, this cabin has been in my family for half a century. I came here this weekend for peace and work. I'm not packing up so your cousins can sleep in my bed." Her eyes narrowed, the veneer of politeness slipping. "Refusal to comply will be documented." "You can document it in stone for all I care," I said, standing straighter. "This is my property. You don't get to take it." For the first time, her carefully curated calm cracked. Her jaw tightened, her cheeks flushed. "You're making a mistake," she hissed. "The board supports me. If you want to live in this community, you'd better learn who runs it." She spun on her heel and marched back to her SUV, gravel spitting beneath her tires as she drove away. I stood on the porch long after she left, staring at the lake, the peace I'd sought now fractured. Karen hadn't just made a request, she'd drawn a line. By refusing her, I'd crossed it. And though I didn't know it yet, that single act of defiance had set a storm in motion, one that would test how far she was willing to go to keep her grip on Whispering Pines. The morning after Karen's visit, I woke to an unusual sound, footsteps crunching in the gravel outside. Peering through the blinds, I spotted two men I vaguely recognized from HOA meetings pacing around my cabin with clipboards. They measured distances crouched by my deck, even snapped photos of my gutters. I opened the door. "Can I help you?" One of them didn't look up. "Routine inspection." "Funny," I replied, crossing my arms. Routine inspections usually come with notice. The second man straightened, cleared his throat, and adjusted his glasses. "The board has concerns about multiple violations. We're just documenting." I didn't need to guess who had sent them. Karen had wasted no time. By noon, a thick packet was taped to my door. Notice of violations. 7 infractions in total. Dock exceeds allowable length. Paint color non-compliant. Unapproved deck modifications. Even excessive firewood pile obstructs landscaping aesthetic. Some accusations were laughable. Others were fabricated outright. At the bottom, bold text delivered the threat. Failure to remedy these violations may result in daily fines and suspension of community privileges. I tore the packet in half, but a nagging unease settled in my gut. Karen was no longer asking, she was declaring war. That evening, as I sat on the porch with a beer in hand, my neighbor Sam ambled over. He lived 2 cabins down, a wiry man in his 60s with a beard gone mostly gray. He dropped into a chair with a grunt. "Word travels," he said. "Heard you told Queen Karen to shove it." I gave a dry laugh. "News travels fast around here. She doesn't take refusal well. Last year she fined me $300 for hanging laundry on a line. Said it ruined the community aesthetic." He took a sip from the bottle I handed him. "She thrives on this stuff, rules, punishments. But you did more than break a rule. You embarrassed her. That's blood in the water." I leaned back, staring at the lake. "What's the worst she can do?" Sam's expression turned serious. "Plenty. Fines, restrictions, maybe even drag you into court. She's got the board wrapped around her finger. They're afraid of her. But this stunt with your cabin? That's different. She's playing with fire." His warning echoed in my head long after he left. The next morning, Friday, the day her family reunion was set to begin, I got my answer. I had just brewed coffee when a caravan of SUVs rolled up the dirt road. Out climbed Karen and a parade of relatives, coolers and duffel bags in hand. She marched to my porch, dressed in a navy blazer despite the heat, clipboard clutched like a weapon. "Mr. Landry," she announced, voice loud enough for everyone to hear, "you've had time to reconsider. Vacate immediately so we can begin preparations." I set my mug down, stepping outside. "Karen, I told you already I'm not leaving. This is my cabin. My family built it. You and your board don't get to take it." She turned to her relatives, gesturing broadly. "You see? This man is refusing to cooperate with community decisions. He's obstructing a family event, completely against the spirit of Whispering Pines." A few relatives shot me dirty looks. One muttered something about selfish neighbors. Others looked uncomfortable, shifting their bags from hand to hand. "Pack it up," I said evenly. "You're not staying here." Her composure cracked. Her eyes flashed with fury. "You leave me no choice." She yanked her phone from her pocket, dialed, and raised it to her ear. Her voice went high-pitched, trembling with feigned distress. "Yes, officer? I need immediate assistance. There's a hostile resident here, refusing lawful instructions. Yes, I feel threatened." My blood ran cold. She wasn't just making a scene, she was weaponizing the police. Inside my chest, my heart pounded like a drum. I stepped back, watching through the window as Karen gestured theatrically, whispering urgently into the phone like a stage actress selling her role. Her relatives whispered among themselves, unsure whether to laugh, leave, or play along. 20 minutes later, sirens pierced the stillness of the lake. A sheriff's cruiser pulled into the drive, lights flashing red and blue. Karen rushed to meet them, arms waving, her voice carrying across the yard. "He's dangerous. He threatened me. He's refusing lawful orders from the HOA. You have to remove him." The deputies climbed out, hands resting near their belts. One approached me on the porch, expression guarded. "Sir," he said evenly, "we got a call about a disturbance. Can you explain what's going on here?" Behind him, Karen stood smugly, chin lifted, already savoring what she thought was victory. And for the first time since this madness began, I realized just how far she was willing to go. The older deputy who approached me looked calm, seasoned, the type who'd seen every small-town drama unfold 100 different ways. He adjusted his hat, his eyes steady but sharp. "Sir," he said, voice measured, "we got a call about a disturbance. Can you explain what's going on here?" I kept my tone even, though my chest felt tight. "Officers, my name is Daniel Landry. This is my family's cabin. I own it outright, deed and all. The HOA tried to force me out so Ms. Whitmore could use it for her family reunion. When I refused, she fabricated violations and now claims I'm dangerous." Before he could respond, Karen shoved forward, pointing at me with theatrical precision. "He threatened me? He's unstable. He's been harassing me for months. You need to remove him before something happens." The deputy lifted a hand, signaling her back. "Ma'am, let me finish speaking with him." The younger deputy stepped closer, pulling out a small notepad. "Mr. Landry, do you have proof of ownership?" "Yes." I ducked inside, retrieved the folder with the deed, and handed it over. The older deputy examined it carefully, nodded once, and returned it. "Looks legitimate." Karen's voice cracked as she tried to interject. "It's forged. Don't you see? He's squatting." "Ma'am," the younger deputy cut in, his tone firmer, "community rules don't override property deeds. Unless there's a court order, this man has every right to be here." For a split second, silence fell. Then Karen's composure splintered. "This is outrageous," she screeched. "I run this community. Without me, there would be no order. If you don't enforce the rules, everything falls apart. He's defying authority, and you're siding with him? I'll have your jobs for this." Her relatives shifted uneasily by their SUVs, murmuring among themselves. Some looked embarrassed, others looked amused. A teenager at the edge of the group lifted his phone, camera pointed squarely at Karen. The older deputy pinched the bridge of his nose. "Ma'am, yelling at us isn't helping." But she doubled down, her voice rising to a shrill crescendo. "You're all against me. I give everything to this neighborhood, and this is how you repay me? With betrayal? With disrespect? I am Whispering Pines. Without me, this place would collapse into chaos." The younger deputy glanced at his partner, muttering something under his breath. They'd clearly seen this kind of meltdown before, but rarely at this volume. Karen's performance grew more frantic. She stomped her foot, pointed again at me, and shrieked, "He's dangerous. Look at him standing there, defiant, smug. He's a menace, and you're protecting him." One of her aunts shook her head, muttering loud enough for others to hear, "She's lost it." Several relatives began loading their coolers back into their vehicles, their excitement for a family reunion evaporating. The older deputy finally stepped forward, his patience at its end. "Ma'am, that's enough. If you continue, we'll have to cite you for disturbing the peace." Karen's jaw dropped, eyes wild. "Disturbing the peace? I am the peace." The younger deputy moved closer, his voice low but firm. "Last warning. Calm down, or we'll have to take you in." For a moment, I thought she might actually attack them. She thrashed against their presence, ranting about lawsuits, conspiracies, and spineless neighbors who don't appreciate real leadership. Her face flushed crimson, her words tumbling over themselves, incoherent with rage. And then, with the whole neighborhood watching, her authority crumbled. The deputies didn't cuff her, but they did guide her firmly toward her SUV, warning her that any further false reports could carry legal consequences. Her relatives kept their distance, some whispering apologies in my direction, others silently climbing back into their cars. The teenager tucked his phone away with a grin. He had caught every second of her meltdown on video. I stood on the porch, equal parts stunned and grimly satisfied. The woman who had tried to seize my family's cabin, who had ruled the community with threats and fines, had just been humiliated in front of her entire clan. Still, I saw it in her eyes as she turned back one last time. Hatred. A promise that this wasn't the end. The deputies gave me a final nod. Mr. Landry, you're within your rights. Keep documentation. Folks like this rarely back down. As their cruiser rolled away and the last of the relatives dispersed, the lake returned to its quiet rhythm. Crickets sang. The water rippled under a soft breeze. But I knew the storm wasn't gone. It had only changed form. Karen had lost control in front of witnesses, but people like her don't vanish. They regroup. They scheme. And whatever she had planned next would be bigger, bolder, and far more dangerous than anything she'd tried so far. The week after Karen's meltdown was deceptively calm. The lake shimmered like nothing had happened. Neighbors nodded politely as they passed, and the HOA newsletter arrived with its usual pages of cheery clip art and condescending reminders about lawn height. But beneath the surface, tension coiled. Karen had been humiliated in front of her relatives and the deputies. People whispered about her breakdown at the lake. Still, I knew her pride would never allow silence to be the final word. I was right. 3 days later, an envelope appeared in my mailbox, stamped with the HOA seal. Inside was a stack of violations: improper waste disposal, unsafe deck railing, even unauthorized bird feeders. Each fine stacked atop the other until the total nearly reached $5,000. At the bottom, in bold red ink, it read, "Failure to comply may result in lien placement against property." It was her retaliation, bureaucratic strangulation disguised as procedure. I didn't rage. I didn't crumple the letter or storm into her office. Instead, I quietly gathered my weapons: receipts for repairs, photographs of my freshly painted deck, proof from the waste company, even dated logs of the feeders Karen herself had approved years ago. Then I went further. I filed a complaint with the County Housing Authority. I handed over not only the bogus fines, but also a detailed binder of every unreasonable citation Karen had issued in the past 6 months. Neighbors, emboldened by her meltdown, began to whisper their own stories. Fines for flower beds too bright, for holiday lights turned on too early, for children's bicycles left leaning against garage doors. Some had paid, some had fought, but all of them carried resentment. And slowly, their resentment turned into something sharper. By the time the county investigator scheduled an audit, half the neighborhood had submitted statements. Karen, once untouchable, now stood cornered by the very people she claimed to protect. The day of the audit, she showed up in her trademark blazer, sunglasses perched high like armor. She strutted to the HOA office, head tilted with the brittle pride of someone who still believed she was in control. But when she opened the door, she found not deference, but the county investigator waiting with a clipboard and 3 neighbors seated across from her as witnesses. I wasn't there to watch the walls close in, but word spread quickly. The audit uncovered years of mismanagement. HOA funds had been redirected for community improvements that never materialized, though oddly enough, Karen's driveway had been repaved twice. Her constant citations lacked proper documentation. Her threats of liens exceeded her actual authority. The empire she had built on intimidation collapsed in the span of an afternoon. Within a week, the board, once her loyal chorus, called an emergency meeting. It was standing room only. Neighbors packed the room, some clutching binders of fines, others just eager to witness the fall. Karen tried to speak, her voice strained, but the booze drowned her out. For the first time, the woman who had barked orders and written threats found herself silenced. The vote to remove her was nearly unanimous. The single no came from Karen herself, her hand trembling as she raised it high. When the gavel fell, she was no longer president. No longer the self-appointed ruler of Whispering Pines. Just another homeowner, stripped of power, her influence reduced to ashes. I didn't celebrate loudly. I didn't need to. Revenge, I realized, is best savored quietly, in the satisfaction of survival. That weekend, I sat on my cabin's porch, watching the lake turn gold under the sunset. The crickets hummed, the breeze carried the scent of pine, and for the first time in months, peace felt real. But even in victory, I remained cautious. People like Karen rarely disappear completely. Some lick their wounds and plot comebacks. Others retreat into bitterness, poisoning from the sidelines. Sure enough, a few days later, I saw her SUV crawl past my cabin. She didn't stop, didn't shout. Just stared at the porch where I sat, eyes dark, lips pressed thin. Then she drove on. The message was clear. She was finished, but she hadn't forgiven. And I realized then that whispering pines would always carry her shadow. But for now, for this moment, I had won. The cabin was safe, the storm had passed, and Karen's reign of tyranny had ended. I raised my glass to the lake, to my family's legacy, and to the quiet truth that sometimes resistance, patient and steady, is the most devastating revenge of all.